of the Muslims killing innocent people.
Steve Klein consulted on the film.
The motivation was to spark some change within Islam.
Only of these few fraction, a fraction of the fraction of these very dangerous men, if we could somehow open up the eyes.
The actress doesn't want her name used because her family is fearful, but she isn't.
What's your overriding emotion right now? Is it fear? Is it anger?
Anger and hurt. I'm not afraid. My husband is afraid for me, but I'm not. I'm pretty pissed.
This actress also apologized to Muslims for what was portrayed in that film and says if she knew what was in it before it was made, she never would have done it. Miguel Marquez, CNN, Los Angeles.
Muslim anger over the perceived insults to Islam has flared up several times in the past. In 2005, the publication of a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad in a Danish newspaper sparked weeks of violent protests across a number of countries. In 2011, a call by Florida preacher Terry Jones to burn Qurans on the anniversary of 9/11 sparked protests in Afghanistan. And then in February of this year, U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan inadvertently burned copies of the Quran. The incident sparked protests and attacks that left dozens dead, including 4 American soldiers. I want to bring back in our guest, Majid Nawaz, the co-founder of Quilliam, which describes itself as a counter-extremism think tank. He's also a founding member of the Islamist party Hizb ut-Tahrir and served 4 years in an Egyptian prison as an Amnesty International prisoner of conscience. What is it about this film that is enraging people so much about the Prophet Muhammad? I mean, is criticism of the Prophet just not okay?
Well, it should be, because, of course, the Prophet himself led by example and forgave people that criticized him, and that's something which these Islamists who are agitating these protests choose to ignore. So then the next question should be, why do they choose to ignore it? Extremists on both ends of the debate profit from the insecurities that exist in their own populations that they try and recruit from. So on the one hand, we've got these relatively obscure or very obscure people such as Pastor Jones or this mysterious filmmaker who nobody would have heard of if not for these protests, and the film itself is an amateur attempt and in fact would have been ignored. When I remember watching the film a few days before all of this happened, and it only had, on YouTube, it had less than 100 views, and now I think it's gone over 1 million. So I think that's on the one end, they exploit this, and on the other hand, you've got extremists in Muslim majority nations who are seeking to exploit this anger so they can recruit and feed off the anger so that they can feed their own agenda.
We're keeping an eye on the situation in Cairo, where protests are underway today, and there's a real sense of fear as to Friday prayers and that this could escalate both in Cairo and right through the Arab and the Muslim world. I want to get your reaction to something we saw on Twitter, which may capture the situation. It says, it's hard to make an American understand just how revered Prophet Muhammad is, also hard to make Muslims understand how sacred the First Amendment is. Your thoughts?
Well, I think the freedom of speech point is valid. I think we must never condone reactions of violence to people that express themselves, but we can condemn their own crude attempts at depicting somebody else's faith without banning them or without reacting with violence. On the same hand, I think that Muslims know their own history, and they know the vast majority of Muslims in Libya, in Egypt, in countries like Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Yemen, they know that the Prophet led by example and forgave people, and this is a minority of demonstrators who are reacting in this way. So I think we've got to put that into context.
How do you deal with extremists who just won't see it any other way? I mean, you were an extremist. You were in jail for 4 years. I mean, how do you turn someone who believes in that kind of extremist ideology to someone as enlightened as you are?
I'm sorry to say the exception in this instance. Most people that go through or went through Egypt's jails came out even more extreme than when they went in, because they, like me, witnessed torture in those jails, and that doesn't do wonders for people's psychology. I think the only solution to this is, in the long term, to put into place counter-narratives that challenge the extremist narratives, because they are clearly profiting from this obscure film, and they're making Pastor Jones and the maker of this film far more famous than they ever would have been. But then to do that, to put out these counter-narratives, we also need to cooperate with the international community and governments across the world so that their actions don't also reinforce extremist narratives.
Well, what should the governments and politicians be doing right now to just cool it a little bit?
I think to be fair to the American administration, they are doing the right thing. They've behaved, they've reacted very sensibly.
They've condemned the video.
Indeed, yeah. I don't think the onus is now on the American government. I think the onus is on the Egyptian government, and what President Morsi did by encouraging demonstrations is irresponsible. responsible. They should be leading by example, though to give him the benefit of the doubt, what I think the Brotherhood may be trying to do is to act as a sponge and to soak up the anger through their own demonstrations, which are more likely to be peaceful than the Salafists. However, I must say that my opinion is that they should be at the moment leading by example and leading by actually telling the Egyptian people, but the reaction of the Prophet would have been the opposite of what's happening currently in Egypt.
We'll see what happens tomorrow, which is going to be a defining day. Thank you so much, Maajid Nawaz, the co-founder of Quilliam. Appreciate it. Still to come on Connect the World, he is now a world-renowned chef with 3 Michelin stars to his name, but it wasn't always that way.